about me come true. And then the angel left her.
Thank you, Andrew. Morning, everyone. Just sneaking in the morning. Good to see you. Get myself all switched on here. And good to have Stephen Grace with us. Oh, that's not liking that. That's interrupting. Something there. There you go. Just stand there, Graham. Good to see everyone. Happy Mother's Day to everyone this morning. A beautiful young New York City mum returned home to her apartment one day to see the building that she lived in engulfed in flames. What made matters worse was that, among others, her infant child was asleep in that building. The firemen weren't able to stop her as she rushed into that building, rushed to her apartment to save her child, and did so, and brought that child out of the building unharmed, rescued her baby. But in the course of that rescue, she was so badly burned that she was going to be disfigured for life. When she looked in the mirror after her recovery and after all the operations, and the doctors had done the best that they could, when she looked in the mirror, she was horrified at the level of her injuries and the disfigurement that had taken place on her face. And she comforted herself with the fact that when her daughter grew up, she would be able to look at those scars and know what her mother had sacrificed to save her life. And the daughter did grew up to be an absolute beauty. And one day, there was one of those short river cruises up the Hudson that the mother and the daughter took together. And the mother sat at the rear of the boat as the daughter was up at the front of the boat, surrounded by a bunch of young men who were keen for her attention. And the mother sat at the rear of the boat watching the bags and the coats and that sort of thing. But the occasion arose for the mother to go to the front to speak to her daughter. And as she approached, one of those young men in a low voice said, "Who is that hideous-looking woman?" "I don't know." In just as low a voice, but not low enough for the mother not to hear. And her heart was broken. I didn't expect, when I read that story, and I was reading some different things for today, and when I read that story, I didn't expect that ending. And I can tell by some of your faces that you didn't expect it either. I didn't want to hear that ending. I didn't want to think about someone who could be that ungrateful. I didn't want to think that she could be so shallow. And I've got to be honest, when I read it and I got to the end, it actually shocked me. What I wanted to hear was, and by the looks of some of your faces, what you expected to hear was, there goes the most beautiful woman in the world, carrying my scars. And we would all have known that that daughter spoke of an inner beauty, an eternal beauty, an out of this world beauty, the beauty of mother, the beauty of mum. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "Together is the most beautiful word in the dictionary, outside of the word mother." And we all know that it's a beauty that's recognized by sacrifice and tenderness and strength and courage and faithfulness and so much more. Mothers, faced with the same choice as that New York City mum, surely you would make the same sacrifice. Faced with the same danger, surely you would show the same courage. Faced with the same threat, surely you would show the same strength. And preachers would use you as examples in their sermons. And people would tell your story and write it down in books, and the world would look at your scars and they would call them beautiful. Thank God that you have never had to make that choice. And I pray that you never will, or even anything remotely similar. And yet, it would be nice to be remembered for something so great. Would be great to have the chance, in a way, to prove your love like that. But you're just an ordinary mum, aren't you? Scripture is full of examples of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. That was my next step. I'll look up some people in the Bible, ordinary people who did extraordinary things. We've got Gideon, Judges chapter 6, especially in verse 15, when he's called by God and he says, I'm from the weakest clan and I'm the least in that weakest clan. Why are you choosing me? David, who's described as a man after God's own heart, but he was the youngest of the family and wasn't even considered. In fact, when Samuel goes and speaks to Jesse and, one of your sons is going to be king, and Jesse brings his sons forward, and he doesn't even think of David. And Samuel says, is that it? And it's almost like Jesse says, well, wait a minute, there is the youngest, but, and that's what he says in verse 11, there is the youngest, but, well, he's out looking after the sheep. Surely it can't be him. Ordinary, wee boy. And then we've got Esther, who was an orphan, and a Jew, and a woman at that time. And you get her story in Esther chapter 2. And not just any old woman, but one of many who the king was looking at to become his wife. And they all go on to be remembered for great accomplishments. Gideon for his great leadership and the amazing victories that he accomplished for God. David for being described as a man after God's own heart. Esther for saving the entire Jewish nation. But then as I was doing that, I came to Luke chapter 1. Go there again. Luke chapter 1. Look at verse 28 again. I forgot my glasses, so I'm going to be reading it from a distance. Luke chapter 1, verse 28. And he came to her and said, greetings, O favoured one, the Lord is with you. This is Mary. O favoured one. By God, look at verse 30. If I can find, there you go. And the angel said to her, do not be afraid, Mary, for you have found favour with God. And look at what a verse we've not read, verse 42. And she exclaimed with a loud cry, this is Elizabeth, she exclaimed with a loud to Mary, blessed are you among women. What is it that makes Mary great? What is it that makes Mary remembered? What is it that makes Mary such a great example? Nothing but the kind of love, the kind of mother that she was to the Lord. And that's it. We never hear of her performing any miracle. We never know of her writing any book or gaining any title. We never hear of her going through any kind of symbolic, glorious death that is such an example to everybody. We don't see this ordinary young woman doing the extraordinary things that we mentioned for Gideon and for Esther. It's an ordinary woman who's remembered for doing an ordinary thing, for the kind of mother that she was to the Lord. The mother of God incarnate. That's why she's remembered. An ordinary mum with the beauty of motherhood that made God choose her to be a mum, that earns the respect deserved by a mum, that leads us to remember her as a mum, and that's how we remember her. Nothing more, but nothing less. What is it that makes the ordinary so beautiful? When everyone else is looking at the face, what is the beauty of a mum? When everyone else is looking at the figure, what is the beauty of a mum? When everyone else is looking at the features, like the eyes and the hair and all the other things that we consider for beauty. What is the beauty of a mum? And surely it is those very ordinary, everyday things. Things that if you could swap for something more astounding, you would not. Things that if you could trade for something more memorable, you would not. Things that if you could exchange for something more creditable, something that gives them more recognition in life and is more remembered at the end of life by more people. And if you could swap everything, all of the ordinary things, everyday things that a mum does, if you could give them up and get some of those, get one of those more dramatic things, you wouldn't change it. Not in a mum. So if your mum is remembered by Fanny, you live her life with you and hold your hand and give you advice. And would you trade all of that so that she could be remembered as some heroine? No, we would not. It's those beautiful, everyday, ordinary things that that makes the mum beautiful. Let's look at two things today. The ear. Year after year after year. It should be year after year, but no, it's not. It's year after year because this is an ongoing thing from the beginning. From day one, mothers are tuned in with that ear. Spurgeon calls them quick ears. Here's why he says, when a child is sick, they are attending to what they need. When that baby is stirring all night, many would wonder how she doesn't fall asleep. If you hired a nurse, you can guarantee that she would not be so vigilant for that baby's cry. But with a mum, that baby doesn't even need to cry. Even if there is a little change to their breathing, who will hear it? Mum. Because her ears are quick. That's a desirable quality for us to say. What is it that we read in Romans chapter 20? In fact, turn there if you want, but I've got a quote here because I wanted to read it from the Common Jewish Bible translation, because some of your translations will say something like live in harmony with one another and that sort of thing. But the Common translates it as be sensitive to each other's needs. That's a quality that God wants us to have. It's a quality that comes natural in mums, especially for their children. It's a quality that's of God. Something interesting, I do want you to turn here, Exodus chapter 14. Just a wee interesting point in this story that we know well from the events of Moses, God leading the children of Israel out of Egypt through Moses. Exodus chapter 14. Let's read very carefully verses 10 through 15. Okay, Exodus 14, 10 through 15. When Pharaoh, so the children of Israel are out, the Hebrews are out, they're at the banks of the Red Sea. The sea's not parted yet, and here come the Egyptians. We know the story, we know the scene, right? When Pharaoh drew near, the people of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them, and they feared greatly. And the people of Israel cried out to the Lord. They said, Moses, is it because there are no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us in bringing us out of Egypt? Is not this what we said to you in Egypt? Leave us alone that we may serve the Egyptians, for it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness. And Moses said to the people, fear not, stand firm, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you have only to be silent. The Lord said to Moses, why do you cry to me? Tell the people of Israel to go. When did Moses cry to the Lord? I didn't read that. I heard the people of Israel, and when they were crying out, Moses stands up with this really confident air and these calming, reassured words. Don't be afraid. God's going to take care of this. And God says to him, Moses, why are you crying out to me? Did you hear Moses crying out? God did. This is a quality, this sensitivity to the fears, to the needs, to the wants, to what's really going on down in here. This is a godly quality. This is something that God has. The people didn't hear Moses crying out. We didn't read about Moses crying out, but God knew what was going on there. I imagine that Moses is scared to death. And he's saying, everybody be calm, everybody just settle down, God's going to take care of it. God, what are you going to do? What's happening here? I have no idea. And God hears it. This is a quality of God. If you imagine what Moses' deeper feelings must have been, he's not superhuman. What his deeper feelings must have been at that time, and God knows it. And mothers aren't just tuned in from the very beginning. They're tuned in through all of the noise and everything else that goes on in life and everything else that crowds life out. And it does happen from day one. But as life gets busier and the world and life becomes more of a turmoil and a struggle, mothers are still tuned in. A resident of a small Washington state village in the late 1800s tells of the story of how the gold rush changed his life and changed the life of those who lived in his village and how it affected his family and his home. Hundreds, maybe even thousands of gold-hungry settlers, he says, crowded into his small village, prompting great amounts of construction activity, laughter, vibrance, and, to quote him, even a printing press. When the Canadian government required those settlers to get a license in Canada to hunt for that precious metal, pretty much everyone except the initial Washington settlers, or Washington residents rather, fled, leaving behind shells of homes, useless acres of mud, and fields of decimated forest. As the last boat pulled away, this family man heard something that caused him to look up to the sky, and it was the musical song of the ducks. He'd forgotten that they were part of the land there. And he says that all of the noise had blocked their song from him during that summertime boom. And then recalls that for an entire day, he simply sat and listened to the ducks. We all need to listen more to the ducks. 46. Verses 1 through 3 we'll read first, but then really it's verse 10. But listen to the turmoil and the uproar of verses 1 through 3. Psalm 46. God is our refuge and strength, a very trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth gives way, though the mountains be moved into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble at its swelling. Hear all that turmoil, hear all that uproar. But in verse 10, the first part of it, he says, be still and know that I am God. There's that sensitivity to hear through all the noise and recognize what matters and recognize what's important. Mother has those kind of ears. It's one of the things that makes her beautiful. The beauty is that all of that is how a mother is designed. It's how she's made. It's how it was meant to be. It's having quick ears to hear what others aren't aware of. It's a sensitivity to what's really needed when others are oblivious to it. It's being tuned in to what's really important when everyone else is listening to what's urgent. And that's a beautiful thing. The hands that do dishes. Those of you who are old enough will remember that advert, Fairy Liquid. Hands that do dishes. You've got to hand it to them when it comes to the beauty of a mum. You know, there is a t-shirt that you can buy now that is called Hands of Greatness. You recognize those hands? No? Nobody? It is actually a print that is printed. You can get it on other things as well, but I could only find it in a t-shirt, although that looks like that's actually in a notebook. It's actually the hands of Michelle and Barack Obama. Hands of greatness, they call it. Now, why they are hands of greatness will depend on your opinion of them and what you think of them, or their accomplishments or their achievements when they were in the White House, and it may be because they've done great things for the economy or race relations or environment, I don't know. Or maybe you don't think they're great at all. Doesn't matter. They're calling them hands of greatness, and each person will have his or her own opinion about why they can be described as hands of greatness. But Scripture, as Ron has already read to us this morning, we're going to read it again, not the whole thing, but go to Proverbs, chapter 31. Scripture has a different picture, a different print that it would entitle Hands of Greatness. And Ron was right to point out that it begins in verse 1 that this is the words of King Lemuel, an oracle that his mother taught him. These are the words of his mother. That first part is anyway. And that's how it starts, and it's great. But look at how it goes on. Look at when it gets to verse 13, and it starts talking about excellence. And you may have a heading there like the virtuous woman, or mine says the woman who fears the Lord, or whatever. How much of excellence is in the hands? Look at verse 13. She seeks wool and flax and works with willing hands. Now, you've got this whole passage who's talking about how excellent this woman is, but just look how much is to do with the hands. Verse 13 there. Look also at verse 15. She rises while it is yet night and provides households and portions for her maidens. Look at verse 16. She considers a field and buys it. With the fruit of her hands, she plants a vineyard. Look at verse 19. She puts her hands to the distaff and her hands hold the spindle. Look at verse 20. She opens her hand to the poor and reaches out her hands to the needy. Verse 22, she makes bed coverings for herself. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. Verse 24, she makes linen garments and sells them. She delivers sashes to the merchants. And look at the true greatness that we find in verse 29. Many women have done excellently, but you surpass them all. And look at what she deserves in verse 31. Give her the fruit and let her works praise her in the gates. This woman is worthy of our praise, worthy of our recognition, worthy of that credit. It's not just hands of greatness. They are also, for the mum, hands of beauty. These are the hands of the most successful model that you've probably never heard of. Her name is Ashley Covington. She is a full-time professional hand model, has been for. She, for protection of her hands, she is almost always wearing gloves. And these are the actual hands of Ashley Covington. She has posed for actresses and celebrities such as Adriana Lima, I don't know who she is, Brooke Shields, and Charlize Theron. Depends how old you are, how many of them you know, and what ones you know. But she's been booked for clients such as Dior, Maybelline, Rolex, and Sephora. She has homes in Virginia, Los Angeles, and New York City. She has agents in almost every major city on the east coast of the US. She has special routines for everyday tasks, like opening a car door. She has a special routine for that. She has a special routine for picking up a box. She has a special routine for how she swings her arms while she walks. Why? Because, in a quote, she says, I have had accidents with all three of those types of situations that have lost me work. She has a net worth of $12 million for having the most beautiful hands in the world. But there is a greater beauty that we often miss. And I want to read you. There was a poem I wanted to read, and then I found another one, and both of them were so good. I want to read you them both. And the first one is called A Mother's Hands. She said her hands were ugly, and she tried to hide them too. But in God's sight 'twas different, for he knew what they could do. They were Jesus, doing tasks for him each day. They washed and ironed and sewed and scrubbed in the most willing, cheerful way. They kept a clean and shining home. They cared for a family. and did the humble, homely jobs in a manner sweet to see. They were ready to help others whenever there was a need, and those ready, willing hands of hers were a source of help indeed. She said her hands were ugly, but not so in his dear labour, morning, noon, and night. Just doing those copy pit. Beautiful thoughts again. Her hands held me gently from the day I took my first breath. Her hands helped to guide me as I took my first step. Her hands held me close when the tears would start to fall, to show me that she would take care of it all. Her hands were there to brush my hair or straighten a wayward bow. Her hands were often there to comfort the hurts that didn't always show. Her hands helped hold the stars in place and encouraged me to reach. Her hands would clap and cheer and praise when I captured them at length. Her hands would also push me, though not down or in harm's way. Her hands would punctuate the words, just do what I say. Her hands sometimes had to discipline, to help bend this young tree. Her hands would shape and mold me into all that she knew I could be. Her hands are now twisting with age and years of work. Her hands now need my gentle touch to rub away the hurt. Her hands are more beautiful than anything can be. Her hands are the reason I am me. Would you swap any of that for 10 times the Ashley Covington fortune? Look at the beauty of the last line of each poem. In that last one there, her hands are the reason I am me. And then the first one, the mother's hands. They laboured for the master morning, noon, and night. That's a beautiful thing. And it takes us back to our text that Andrew read for us in Luke chapter 1, and especially verse 38. Did you notice what Mary said? After she'd been told that she would be mother to the Lord, she said in verse 38, "Behold, I am the servant of the Lord. Let it be to me according to your word." And she doesn't go off to some great mission field. She doesn't make those big sacrifices that we're looking to be able to make and impress those that we love and prove in such a dramatic way. She just becomes the mother of the Lord. And in doing so becomes the servant of God. She was the servant of God simply by being a mum. A beautiful, ordinary, everyday mum. Elijah and I watch a program, not together, but we enjoy the same program, The Goldbergs. I don't know why he enjoys it. I think it's because I grew up in the 80s, but he must maybe laugh at that's what his dad was brought up in. And that not so great man, Murray Goldberg, when he was speaking to his daughter, and his daughter had great plans for life, and of course the mum's just a housewife. And the daughter makes the comment, which maybe every daughter in the world has made to her mum at some point, "You don't even have a job." And of course, there's a whole lot of hurt goes on and all that. And the dad sits down with the mum, sits down with the daughter, and who's got all these plans for her life and for her future. And he says, "You know, you may not want to be what your mum is, but you got to respect it." God had, when he spoke to Mary, he had already used ordinary people for extraordinary things. And Mary, he was looking to use an ordinary woman for ordinary things. And it was beautiful. And it was great. Mothers, don't worry about God using you for great things. See the greatness in the ordinary things that you do every day. Mothers, don't seek to be remembered by the masses in awe. Know that you will be remembered by your family. with thanks. And mothers, don't wish for that opportunity to make the world-changing sacrifice. Realize the life-changing sacrifices that you make all the time. People talk of greatness and bravery and beauty. Greatness is measured by how much money you have and all that sort of thing, but nothing is greater than a mum who spends almost everything she has and is on the ones that she loves. People talk about bravery. Bravery is awarded for proclaiming your sexuality these days. Oh, you're so brave. But nothing is braver than a mum who takes on the awesome responsibility every single day without thanks for shaping another life. It's a brave decision to make. And people talk about beauty in terms of skin tones and all that sort of thing. But nothing is more beautiful than a woman who gets up, a mother who gets up every single day and shows what it is to serve and forgive and believe and love and so much more. I came across a book in my study for this by Pamela Bilbray and Brian Jones. You don't have to go out and buy it because it's not going to do you much good. It's called Ordinary Greatness. But I read the description of the book, and it's a book about giving advice to companies to make them greater and develop leadership and all the rest of it. So it's called Ordinary Greatness. But if you read that description of the book and replace a few of the words, like instead of organization, replace it with mother or child or whatever, the description could be written about mothers. And the title can certainly be given to mothers. Ordinary Greatness. Mothers, you are the ordinary greatness of our everyday lives. And it is exactly how God has designed it to be. In fact, it is a beautiful representation of exactly who He is, this great God of ours. We may not always appreciate what you do. We may not always like what you say. We may not always know what you give in real terms, but it doesn't change the greatness and it doesn't change the beauty. Mothers, we thank you for all that you are to us. And today, we thank God for making you mothers. God bless.